Welcome to Above and Below, the podcast of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. My name is Sonya Bohmann, and I am the Executive Director of CIASP. Joining me today again is my co-host, Zulq Malik, and of course, our friend, Dr. John Gaal. So I'm going to have Zulq reintroduce himself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sonya. It's always a pleasure to be beside you. Today more so than yesterday, but today for sure. My name is Zulq Malik. I'm a volunteer board member for CIASP. But prior to that, I've spent almost the last 30 years in the construction industry space in various capacities, had my own construction company for just shy of 20 years. But more importantly, we've been really focused on how do we keep people motivated and running on a job site so we get optimal efficiency. But more importantly, how do we get them back the next day? Right.
Awesome.
So
Absolutely.
Glad to be here so we can have that conversation, Sonya.
Great. Thanks. And Dr. John Gaal.
Hello. I'm really appreciative that you've included me in your podcast series. I technically retired at the beginning of February of 2019 after 40 years in the construction industry. Started out as a carpenter apprentice back in the late 70s and worked my way up all the way to the executive board of the Carpenters Union. I was the director of training and workforce development for many of those years. I oversaw 9 training schools that were all federally approved by Department of Labor, 6 in Missouri, 2 in Kansas, 1 in Southern Illinois. And I'd say in the early 2000s, our Trauma One hospital here came to us and said, hey, we want to start doing studies of safety on your apprentices. And I said, yeah. And that's how all this kind of started in my life.
Awesome.
So you said kind of retired. But from what I know about you,
technically retired.
Well, he did say technically retired.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what kind of
what I know
means.
about him is that that's really where all of this began. So you might have retired from that career, but you started a whole new one in 2020, right?
So in 2019, after I retired, because of knowing that this was not work done yet, I couldn't walk away. And so I took on 2 consulting contracts, one with Washington University School of Medicine, where we studied how to safely bring people who were in medically assisted treatment for opioid use disorder back into the trades. So that was for the St. Louis union construction industry. And at the same time, with University of Missouri, they had a project going on where I was consulting on all industries, whether they're union or non-union, in all counties throughout the state of Missouri. And so from the Mizzou project, what we came up with was a program called Recovery Friendly Workplaces. Mm-hmm. And that's implemented statewide amongst a number of industries. And the St. Louis project, actually, Dr. Anne Marie Dale was the lead PI on that, and I assisted her with that project and came up with a 30-plus page report on how construction companies could safely bring their people back into the industry.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
So Dr. Dale used to be a board member for us, and she has since retired as well. But I just had a conversation.
Hold on, real retire or fake retire?
No, real retire.
Because I'm going to throw it out there. I'm a little bit younger, and I want to entertain if we do fake retirements or real retirements. So what does real retirement really look like for you, John?
Mary, my dear wife, said we will figure that out in about a year or so.
Oh, okay.
So fake retirement means I want to leave work, but my wife doesn't want me at home. Is that what that means?
No, honestly, she actually said last night at dinner, it would be nice, to have a dinner with you that your phone's not blowing up the whole time.
That just do not disturb, John. I mean, sorry, I can help you out with that.
Yeah. So March of 21, so about 2 years after I had retired, the Missouri AFL-CIO, which is the blanket federation for unions across the entire state, they started a nonprofit arm called Missouri Works Initiative. And they said they were going to have 4 pillars under that initiative, one of them being worker wellness, and they asked me to be the director of it. And I didn't really want to commit to a full-time position, so we came to a compromise that I would be brought on in that position part-time for 3 years. My math isn't so good because it's 20.
Right? I'm like,
As a 2x4
Okay.
or 2x6, they're close, right, John?
So why this conversation? Why the topic of postvention, of opioids, of all of the things that became your second career? Are you comfortable sharing with us why that's important to
Oh,
you?
certainly. Yeah, I just don't know how much time you all have. So it
We're
really started in March of 2016. I mean, we were, like I said, back in the early 2010s, we were already starting to bring key people into our organization. One was Bill Wilkerson. He came out of Canada, an international speaker on mental health in industry, not just construction, but all industries. Just a wonderful person. Sadly, he's passed since then, but a great guy. And an A#1 dresser, red suede shoes.
Ooh.
It's a Canada thing.
Yep.
All Canadians are really good guys. Can you send that memo to people? Won't name any names, Trump.
He kind of opened the door for us. And it was about the same time that we realized that with the studies with Dr. Brad Evanoff and Dr. Anne-Marie Dale, who were both doctors at WashU School of Medicine at the time, that they were looking at the physical aspects of safety. And it was the Great Recession that brought on the mental aspects of safety that really kind of brought those to the top. And I went back to them and said, we need to start focusing on the entire human being and not just the physical aspects of safety. We now need to start looking at the mental aspects of safety. And they said, well, you know what? We actually have partners up at the University of Iowa, and they got a name for that. I said, what's that? And they said, total worker health. I said, let's get on it. So it was actually in, I guess sometime after 07, 08, somewhere around 09, we started moving in that direction. And then it wasn't too far thereafter that opioids took a hold of our industry. And in March of 2016, another construction labor leader here in the St. Louis area lost his son to an opioid overdose. And so this wasn't just any construction labor leader. He was a friend of mine from high school. We ran track together. He was a year older. He was a senior when I was a junior type thing. We'd known each other in the industry for 30 plus years. And it was really at that point that it became clear to me what the definition of stigma was. Because I'd known him for 40 years and had never known that his son was having issues with opioids. And so about a month after he passed, I had a one-on-one conversation with him. And he said, oh, John, he said that he was 36 when he died. And he'd been in and out of recovery and rehab for 18 years, so half his life. And I went home that night and sat around our dinner table, and I was just deflated. And I told Mary and I, we have 4 children. And I told the kids, I said, I just can't imagine being a parent and losing a child. I said, it's got to be devastating. And so I went back and had a conversation with them. I said, I can't fix the past, but I certainly can do something about the future if you allow me to walk with you. And so he and I went to an opioid summit, conference, workshop, whatever you call it, every month for the rest of 2016. And we started to actually make some movement in the industry. A lot of doors slammed in our face because no one wanted to hear about it. Off to getting that same old quote, legal post, not to entertain what you're talking about, those kinds of things. And then sadly, in March of 2017, I lost my son, my 24-year-old son, to suicide.
I'm so sorry.
And so that individual came to me and said, you walked with me last year. It's my time to walk with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you recall, it was right about that time that the CDC finally came out and said, as an industrial sector, construction was number 1 when it came to opioid misuse and number 2 when it came to suicide. So we now knew we could break those barriers down because we had the scientific evidence, plus we had the personal stories to both of those tragedies. And we started to open some doors. And so that's what started to move us, into this direction. And then a third incident would have been another person in the St. Louis region in September of 21. I'll never forget. It was a Saturday night. My wife, my youngest daughter, and I sat down to watch a movie. And 20 after 7, my phone starts blowing up. And it's a Saturday night. And I look down at my phone. I'm like, this guy never calls me, much less ever calls me on a weekend. So it's got to be something. So I excused myself from the room, went into another room, and he shared with me that sadly, earlier that day, his son had taken his life. And it was on Facebook, and he wanted to know if I knew about it. And I said I didn't. I had not looked at Facebook that day. And he said, well, John, you're the only person I know as a parent who's lost a child to suicide. Mm-hmm. Can you talk with me? And I was like, I was never confronted with that. So sure. I said, of course I can. Just tell me what you want me to do. How can I help you? How can I help your wife? How can I help your children? And so this was Saturday night. That call lasted about an hour. And one of the last things I said to him, I said, now listen, I'm not saying this out of cruelness. I'm just telling you, I've been in your shoes before. I am not calling you tomorrow. I said, I'll call you on Monday. I promise I will call you on Monday. And he said, why won't you call me tomorrow? I said, because I know your phone is never going to stop. You're going to hear from people you haven't heard from for 15, 20 years. Family, friends, coworkers, whatever it might be. And I said, you need that time to process. Sure. But I'll do follow-up on Monday. So later in the afternoon on Monday, I called him. And I asked him how things were going. I knew that was, kind of a stupid question, but it had to be said. It's hard to phrase it any other way. And then I said, were you and your wife and your children able to at least consider reaching out to some of the resources we spoke of the other night? And he said that this was very fulfilling for me. He said, oh, for sure. That's why I'm glad you called. He said, my kids are already connected to a source. My wife's connected to a second source, and I've already connected to a third source to help us start healing. And so that was wonderful to see, because, I had never expected that call. And I really hadn't had someone talk to me in that intimate of a manner since March of 17. So almost 4 years have gone by, And I'm not saying this in a cruel or mean way, but it's like ripping the Band-Aid off, I was just starting to see my family, start to heal, and whatever that means. And so anyway, so, time passed. And then a year ago, in the summer of 24, from the end of July to the end of October, during those 12 weeks, I took 8 more of those types of calls.
Wow.
Saying to me,
oh, John,
what do I do? Mm-hmm. And I was like, in my head, I've done this before. We can get through it. But I just knew that something was wrong with our system. If I'm the only person that people are reaching out to, the system is bigger than me. And right. I just knew as a researcher, I could do something about this. And so I set off on a path to study this issue of suicide postvention in the construction industry. And I want to set the tone here and now. I'm not trying to boil the ocean. I'm just trying to help people who are in those first 48 hours. Because I can attest, as someone who was in those first 48 in March of 2017, I had nowhere to turn to. And that's just, you're in shock already, and then of disbelief, but knowing that you just can't go to your phone and reach out for resources that are specific to the issue, that was really hard to try to process. And I thought, as a carpenter, I've always been a fixer, so I'm going to try to fix this. I may not, it may not be perfect, but it's got to be better than what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Your story and the story of others that you walked this path with. You're so right in saying that first 48 or even that's really the hardest part. But you talked about the pulling the Band-Aid off, and that when I talk about loss survivorship, to me, the analogy that I use is that it's like a scab, and that you always have the scar, but the scab starts to get a little less raw, and
Right.
you can continue to function a little bit more each day. And so I admire so much the work that you're doing and the places that you are moving this conversation. I had a really great conversation not that long ago with a mutual friend of ours, Bob Vanderpool.
Yeah.
And Bob and I talked about the space between the time that something happens and the time that you're ready to start becoming part of the mission as well. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about what that looks like and how postvention really is different than maybe even prevention or intervention, and why we can almost use postvention as a strategy for those things.
Right. Well, I'm really glad you brought it up. And I know suicide prevention's in your organization's title,
It
so
is.
don't take this as me taking a shot at you. I'm just looking at where my perspective is. So I refer to suicide postvention as the third leg of the suicide triangle. And it's basically how we care for lost and attempt survivors after an incident.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what I call and others call aftercare.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas prevention, that tends to be more focused on awareness, while
Yes.
intervention is what we do and how we do it, and how we react when we notice signs of suicidal ideation with family members, with coworkers or people in our community. And sadly, in my eyes, most of the resources for the past couple of decades have been almost totally funneled towards prevention and somewhat towards intervention,
Agree.
but little to no funding on this concept of postvention.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, unless and until we connect those three legs of the triangle, I think we're going to continue to see suicide rates increase. I have a friend and mentor. His name's Dr. Frank Campbell. Most people
I just
consider
met
him.
him.
Most people consider him the godfather of suicide postvention. He is a big proponent of the concept you were just mentioning, Sonya, and that is that postvention is prevention. Mm-hmm. So we have to accept that and work with that. From what I have researched so far, we know that survivors of suicide, whether it's an attempt or a loss, are very vulnerable to suicide themselves after an incident. So, and sadly, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have historical and cultural attitudes and beliefs that, pertain to this concept and topic of suicide, but they tend to perpetuate stigma, right?
They do.
And it wasn't too long ago that suicide was considered a crime in most countries,
Mm-hmm.
and is sin in many religions. So, so as such, when you think about it, when it comes to shame, blame, guilt, anger, these all tend to be part of that stigma, right? So one thing I'm a firm believer in, and what I've learned in the research, is that if and when we reach out sooner than later,
Mm-hmm.
these lost survivors can begin to stabilize the world around them and know that they're not alone in this struggle. And, again, I give a lot of kudos to Dr. Frank Campbell. Yeah, he's been a great resource.
Absolutely. Why do you think, and I know this veers off a little bit of some of the things that we've talked about before, but why haven't we given enough attention to the postvention conversation? Do you think it's because it's so sticky and messy? Is it because hard to pinpoint? What is it that hasn't given it the attention that it's needed?
I think that because of the stigma, people cannot get past doing the awareness stuff. I think there if you look at my research and when I ask people, whether it was in a survey or whatever, most people are familiar with what suicide prevention is. I would say upwards of 90%. But even with intervention, that drops 10 to 20%. And then with postvention, it drops another 10 to 20% more. So we're in a range from about 60 to 90 between the three legs of the triangle. A lot of suicide postvention is establishing relationships with other entities in your community who have legal authority that may not be so willing to open their doors to the services one might wish to provide. So
you're talking about like a medical examiner there? Is that what we're...
That's right. So, so when I interviewed Dr. Frank a year or so ago, one of the things he said, when you do your study, you got to make sure you don't just have attempt survivors and loss survivors and researchers and clinicians, and that. You got to make sure you've got those first responders. And he was adamant. He was adamant. I'm not talking just about police and fire. He said, I'm talking about either a medical examiner or coroner, something along those lines too. So I think that's part of the process that he has, started. He's got a concept he calls LOSS, LOSS, that he created in his doctoral studies back in the early 90s. And that stands for Local Outreach of Suicide Survivors, for suicide survivors. And so these are creations of teams of these local resources and volunteers so that they're at the beck and call for a suicide incident. And a number of them have made great inroads. It took some time to get beyond that barrier with the medical examiners and the coroners. But most, they just had their national conference a week ago, lost it up in Omaha. And I tell you what I learned there was, because there were a number of panels with first responders on them. Those responders who've bought into the concept are like, hey, when lost volunteers are there to help the survivors, it gives us opportunity to do our job, to examine the scene and so on and so forth, because that's really not their niche of that kind of care for people. But again, it's just, I think getting back to the postvention, it's that system, Zulq and Sonya, wasn't there for me in March of 2017. And I got to tell you, I spent the first week of June, just a few months ago, over in England and Scotland in a couple of different venues, learning about suicide and suicide postvention. And they are so far ahead of us in this space.
Much different conversation there, right?
Yeah. It's very open. Anytime I connect with someone, they're like, hey, have you talked to so-and-so? And they make the introduction. And when you call them, it's like we're talking right now. We've known each other for years, and they're very open and honest. And so I've been very blessed. And upon my return, I know we're making headway here because upon my return, by the middle to late June, I had received like 3 different notices, emails saying, hey, this group is doing a postvention and this group's doing a postvention. So I was like, oh, that's great. And what I liked about it, people from all those different groups participated either in my studies survey or my studies interview. So it's good to see this catching on and moving in a positive direction.
So if I may, first off, John, I'm sending you a big virtual hug, my friend. In the order of things, I don't think I'm a parent of an 8.5-year-old. I think I would be absolutely broken if something happened to my little one. So I can only, I don't even want to know how you feel. Like, I swear to God, I hope I never have to deal with that. But you touched on it.
Zulq, I am always proud to speak of my son. Yeah. Always. He was a great human being. Yeah. And he had multiple concussions in junior and senior years from high school football and soccer. And he came to me and said, "Hey, Papa," he said, "I got a chance to play soccer and football in the same season." I played college soccer, so I was like, "Oh, that would be cool. That would be cool."
Yeah.
He was a fabulous athlete. And he said, "How do you think I should go about it?" I said, "Go to write the athletic director and see if you can get permission." And that same day, he got a response. He said, "Yes, you can, under one condition, that the four of us, meaning the AD, the varsity football coach, the varsity soccer coach, and little John sat in the same room. And John professed before all of them what his primary sport was, because that took the lead on anything from going forward." So
I have to ask, what did he pick?
he played football.
Oh,
He put
I'm a soccer
football.
player.
So, well, he went on to be an all-state soccer player,
Ah.
which kind of upset him
Perfect.
because he loved football better than soccer, but he was fabulous. But he had 2 concussions his junior year, one from football, one from soccer. And then he had 2 concussions in senior year. Here's the irony of it. The last football game of the season, he gets knocked out. He gets up and walks to the wrong huddle.
Oh my goodness.
That's when they took him out of the game.
Oh my goodness.
So in the state of Missouri at the time, the protocol was you can either sit him out for 2 weeks and then let him come, or you send him to a doctor and get a note for an early release. So Mary and I decided the right thing to do was sit him out for the 2 weeks. And this is back in 2009, 2010.
Or we didn't
know
have
a lot of
any
We
of
didn't know this stuff yet. We
knowledge.
didn't know.
Yeah, so we sat him out. So Zulq, sadly, he goes into his last soccer game of the year, goes up for a head ball.
Header.
He was 5'9", and he had, standing still, he had a 36-inch vertical leap. I mean, it was incredible. And he went up for a head ball, connected head to head,
Yeah.
got knocked out again. That's called second impact syndrome.
Yeah, that's
And
hard.
there's almost a point of no return there. And he fought it. He fought it for 7 more years. He
Oh,
did
my
it,
goodness.
he did his best. But
It hurt.
yeah,
John, it's hard. Like, where there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast or, from the industry predominantly are going to be parents. And these are the real conversations that we need to have as not only as people that we coined it not too long ago, Sonya and I, construction warriors. These warriors are parents, their dads, their moms, right? Their uncles, their aunts. Some instances, it could be grandparents. And we need to, and your story is helping open that dialogue that we're not alone. And I'm sorry that you were alone when it happened in your family. And I think the society is very grateful that you were able to help so many other families after it experienced for you. So,
well, Zulq, I got to tell you, it
Yeah.
permeates to different parts of your life, because never would I have thought
that you would be
how,
doing this.
when we sent my son's brain up to Dr. Ann McKee at Boston University, she's the famous doctor that
Yep.
studies most of the NFL players who've taken their lives.
Yeah.
Little John was, at the time, one of the youngest high school football players ever to be diagnosed with stage 1 CTE. And so that set me off in another direction. And so in our worlds, they collide. One of your board members, Sonya, is a dear friend of mine, Dr. Joe Whiteman. And you know his story from a military perspective. We have a mutual friend, Scott Greenhouse,
Yeah.
who's a safety engineer. He has his story from Florida University, and our worlds collided. And we've done presentations on head injuries in construction, and we use our lived experiences to help people understand why we need to shift from old technology, meaning hard hats, to new technology, meaning safety helmets. And so that's another
That's a
panel.
whole other podcast.
That's a whole other ball of wax that we can go into.
And so
I
many
wanted-
really interesting points of topic. I mean, I think that's what I love so much about this industry and having these conversations is that there's so many dots that get to connect, but so many people that are willing to share their stories their experiences because they know that there's such power in those shared stories, and those shared stories really and truly save lives.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you know, our dear friend, mutual friend, Cal Byer, he and I, we've done presentations and articles and all that trying to shift, because these are invisible wounds, and people sometimes have a hard time. If they can't see it, they don't believe it, you know? And so in construction, there was a study from like 2003 to 2010 that showed that a quarter of the people who died were from TBIs. So
wow,
what are we waiting for? What are we waiting
and just
for?
so we're clear for everyone's listening, TBI, traumatic brain injuries.
Yes.
Right? Because there'll be a whole population of what's a TBI. No, it's not your TBI.
Oh, yeah. Well, then let me go back. And CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
I know we've skewed a little bit from the.
That's okay. That's how these conversations evolve.
I think we started at the beginning, John, that we might go off on a tangent. There's a topic that I actually kind of want us to bring us back to. I know you touched on postvention, the third leg. I think that's a very important conversation piece, because one of the things that Sonya and I, and with some of the other guests, we've been talking about cultural changes, right? The idea of talking about prevention, I think that's largely attributed to the fact that we always look at preventative items, right? So in construction, we've been really big about, let's prevent an injury by making you wear a hard hat or a bump cap or helmet nowadays. We're going to make you wear safety glasses. We want to prevent an eye injury, right?
Right.
And then our first aid to prevent an injury is we have a first aid kit or we have an eye wash station, right? That's our intervention. But we haven't really largely discussed as an industry, what does intervention look like? And intervention is a change of culture in our space.
Yeah.
And, you know, the byproduct of the intervention is that, you know, sometimes the intervention fails. And intervention fails, and unfortunately, the intersection between failure and suicidal or mental health issues turns into postvention. And I'm really happy you talked about this idea of postvention, because, yes, our model could only be more complete if we have a postvention model.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
So
I'd be the first to tell you.
Yeah.
I'd be the first to tell you.
So
and I
assure you, John, you have a promise from me that in our upcoming board meeting, I'm going to table that as an issue.
So we talked about postvention as in September as the intervention or prevention strategy. It was something that we kind of pulled to the forefront of the conversation because we know that all of these things have to go in lockstep. It does have to be that third leg.
Yeah, there has to be the prevention, intervention, postvention strategy, because I can say this, I'm going to say it, I don't care if some of my board members will be in disagreement. We want to bring suicide rates to zero, when we know in reality that's our objective. But along the way, we still have to have those strategies along the way. And then we have to do this. I know Sonya just cringed because I said it.
No, what I cringe about is, John, this is one of those moments where I say, we'll be cutting that just because I'm
No, we're going to keep it in because that's the truth, right? The truth is harsh to swallow. But the reality is that we need to have that three-legged approach.
We do.
That would only make us define us better for the industry. Because, I mean, if I could today, I would wipe it out. If I had that magic wand and I could wave it and I could spin it around, I would want all pain and suffering to end for every human being on the planet, period. That's my magic wand. That's what I would wish for people. But I guess I don't have that magic wand. And then the pain and suffering, yes, maybe construction didn't create it. Maybe it was something that happened in their athletic years. Maybe it happened because of some other career path that they had. And you know what? There's an underlying health issue that just disappears and it goes away. And people go, well, hey, you had a concussion 5 years ago. Is it better? We don't know. Right? We're too scared to put it on our medical records at work so that, you know what, maybe someone can monitor it, right? Not that we have the tools to monitor anything yet, but let's say we could monitor it, right? We come up with the technology to do that. But then, you know what, even then that's going to fail sometimes, right? Because we just don't see all the links. And you're studying this, you've studied this, and for the benefit of everyone's view, John has attained a wealth of knowledge, not just from a lived experience, but from an educational experience. And his educational experience is why he's a doctor. So if you got the flu, I don't know that John can medicate you, but John, we have a saying, we have an individual in our office, his name is Dr. Evan Lewis. He said, heart attack, call 911 doctor. He's the other kind of doctor, right? So you've taken the time to educate yourself, but your education is actually more meaningful to us and we should be listening to you. you spent 40 years in our sector in a very strong capacity where you were responsible for nurturing people that became tradesmen that are currently probably sitting at close to a very high journeyman retirement level that they're about to move on to their next stage of life, which is hopefully retirement. So how do we get this conversation of community started now, John?
Well, I think I would say that we have a number of strategies. I think the one that I'd want to share here is first and foremost, we have to do more education on the topic. And AFP, yes, American Foundation
AFSP.
Sorry, American Foundation Suicide Prevention recently launched a 1-hour postvention program called Caring Communities. It's, I think, a great piece, and awesome. I would not say that if I didn't believe it. It can be delivered in person. It can be delivered virtually. I would highly recommend your listeners or viewers to locate their local chapter and ask them more information about caring communities. I think that's a great place to start. Here's another one. If you don't want to wait for that, or while you're waiting for that to happen, go to Google, and I would search what I consider probably the best 20 minutes on the topic of suicide postvention. It's a video from PsychArmor. They have a project called Face the Fight. And within that, they've got it's less than 20 minutes on healing after suicide. Dr. Springer, who works with Dr. Carla over at TAPS, she does a fabulous job. And it doesn't cost you a red cent. It just costs you the time of watching it, right? So again, it's PsychArmor. They've got a program called Face the Fight, and within Face the Fight, they've got this 20-minute video called Healing After Suicide. And then I think, I don't think construction has all the answers, obviously, and the United States certainly doesn't. That's why I had to go over to Europe to study this. But I think it's worth looking at other industry sectors models when it comes to postvention. So the K through 12 school system, if you're not familiar with Dr. Anna Moeller, she just put a book out about a year ago called Life Under Pressure. It is fabulous, and it actually connects the three legs of the triangle. And very approachable person. She is just a kind-hearted person. Over in Scotland, there's a veterinarian. I love her story. So she's a veterinarian, surgeon, by the way, seeing so many of her colleagues dying by suicide. It's a very high rate. Very
high industry, just like construction. Yeah.
It's high press.
And have access to phenobarbital that you put cats and dogs down with, right? So she stepped away and went to get her PhD. She earned her PhD and actually studied this issue of her colleagues dying around her. And she's created a postvention program in Scotland called Vet Life. Another great human being. You can reach out and have a conversation just like this. And then I've already mentioned one, Dr. Carla Stone-Patton. She with TAPS. She just has done a great job. I like their approach because it's not a timeline approach. Most of these projects that you'll look at, you can pull an 18 or 30-page postvention guide. They typically look at short-term, mid-term, long-term, and they'll define short-term like 0 to 3 months and mid-terms 3 to 9 months or whatever, and long-term anything over 12. They don't approach it like that. They approach it, it's 3-pronged. Stabilization is the first prong. Grief work is the second prong. And post-traumatic growth is the third prong.
Interesting.
And I just love what Dr. Carl has done with that. Near me, not 40 miles to the east of me, is another one of these stars in my world. Her name's Dr. Olivia Johnson, former military, former police, stepped out, got her doctorate, and guess what she's doing? She's doing work in this space. And so she has an institute called the Blue Wall Institute. She's identified the 10 suicide factors for first responders, and now has developed that for the construction industry.
Incredible.
So Olivia's doing great work as well.
And Colorado. Johnson Depression Center.
I'm sorry.
The Johnson Depression Center just came out with a Postvention piece that is a bolt-on to VitalCog.
All right. That was one of the 3 I was telling you when I
Yep.
got from Europe. So I squeezed my way into that first group when they launched the training. Yeah. Yeah. And the last person, not to say that it's the only last person, but the people in the postvention space that made an impression on me, her name's Dr. Hillary Causer. She's done some fantastic work, especially with nurses, how they have to deal with, the aftermath of suicides in their units. She's in England. And then I mentioned the lost teams earlier. And the ones that are really kind of hitting the home runs are located in Louisiana, Nebraska, and Ohio. Those are probably the ones that are really hitting some home runs. If you want some good models out there of how to implement this locally, and they'll tell you, as Dr. Frank will tell you, what we do in Baton Rouge isn't going to work in St. Louis or in
100%.
Philly.
We have cultural differences.
Yeah.
We got to educate ourselves on what postvention is, and then what are the models that are out there? What's working out there? I think that's where we began.
Well, thank you for sharing incredible resources and the instrumental work that you're doing. We appreciate it so much. And I know that there's so much more to this conversation. I feel like there's another piece of this that we can certainly delve into in the coming months for sure. As we wrap up.
Can I just delve into one more piece? Because
of course you can.
This is vital. This is vital from my study. So I basically had 3 research questions. And it was one of the prep questions you guys sent me. So I think I can't just stone unturned. So you asked me about how does peer support play into this conversation? And you may know, especially Sonya, because of your relationship with Jamie Becker, right? So I had the privilege of working with the construction laborers here in St. Louis, locals 42 and 110. And help them set up a lean program here in St. Louis. We interviewed in 22, we launched it in 23. So I've seen firsthand how peer support can really positively impact an industry. So what we did is we pulled 2 laborers out of the field with 15, 20 years experience, put them on the health and welfare's payroll, and then we trained them up, to be peer supporters. And I have to tell you, they've just done a wonderful job in addressing the needs of their members and their families and other beneficiaries. As we mentioned earlier, I've been researching this topic of suicide postvention in the construction industry since late summer of 2004. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm specifically looking at that at the first 48 hours after an incident. There are 3 research questions that I had. And one of those that I asked 64 surveyees and 15 interviewees, and by the way, I covered 5 different countries in this work. I wanted their thoughts on the use of peer support in order to deliver postvention in our industry sector. Over 80% of the surveyees insist on the use of peer supporters who have been trained. So that's wonderful to know. And slightly under 50% of the interviewees indicated that peer supporters were vital because of their shared experience and their understanding. So they've walked a mile in those people's shoes.
Right.
And so I really view the training of peer supporters will help complete their set of tools in their toolboxes. It's not going to be a full-time job. It's just one more thing they can lean on when they're dealing with mental health issues. Again, whether it's suicide, SUD, OUD, or what have you. So appreciate you allowing me to work that in.
No.
We appreciate you sharing it because sometimes Sonya and I do derail ourselves. More Sonya than me. I'm just saying that. Not putting it up there. You can cut that one out.
Oh, don't worry. I will.
She cuts me out all the time.
All right. As we wrap up, we always wrap with one final question to our guests. And that is, what would your word of the year be?
My word of the year, I would say it's perseverance.
Okay.
And I'm 66 years old. And as we started out, technically retired from the industry back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned, I saw so much work that was left undone in the space that I couldn't walk away. It's not who I am. So my hopes are to this suicide postvention project up off the ground during calendar year of 2026, truly as part of my swan song.
I love that. And anything we can do to be part of that, please let us know. We know that the more that we lock arms with people that are doing the work in this industry, the stronger we are together. And I think that'll go right to Zulq's word of the year as we wrap up this conversation, which is?
I exercise gratefulness. I'm grateful for everything that happens in my universe. Grateful to be a dad, grateful to be here today, because I got to tell you, you sucked the wind out of my sail earlier on, but you're giving me hope that we can put the sail back in, the wind back into ourselves.
No, I often leave training. I tell people it's really important that you keep on trying, but it's also very important that you realize that sometimes your best isn't good enough. But you know what? There's still people out there who need you, and you just can't give up.
Yeah. And more importantly, I'm grateful, John, that you're here today to share this story with all of us, because it's a real story. It's a real story that a lot of the people before us, and hopefully none of the people after us, have to carry a torch for. But it's very important that the industry comes together now to really put a big dent and a change, so that it's a thing of the past, and we're talking about other things that we have to go tackle in our industry. So thank you for you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Very honored.
Thanks for being with us today. And so my word of the year is intentionality. So with intentionality and gratefulness, we thank you for your perseverance, John. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great weekend. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.